1. When I was 16 years old, I was living with my dad. However, I hung out at my mother's apartment complex most of the time. The live-in janitor was this old guy, about 60 years old. Dragon Lord, we'll call him. His hair was completely grayed down to his porn stash. He would stop by my mom's place from time to time and chat. He told us that he knew some karate, which was a lie, and I wanted to learn from him. So it took a while for my mom to trust him before I could go to his apartment to learn from him. For those not in the know, it is completely normal for a sensei to teach a student in their living rooms. However, when I got there, his place was a wreck. There was no room for kicking, punching, or moving in general. My current Shihan, or professor, told me that his Shihan always said, "No need for furniture. Furniture gets in the way of kata." His place stank of marijuana bad. He had a bowl of pills sitting right there on his table as if it was a frickin' candy bowl. He even grabbed a handful of pills and downed them in front of me like they were M&Ms. In order to use the bathroom in his place, you had to walk through his bedroom, which was littered with lewd pictures and objects. I was not going anywhere in that apartment. After that, I tried to ignore him, but he kept hanging around my mom's floor, trying to bump into me. I dodged around him because I'd be damned if I couldn't hang out with my mom. However, he started to have letters addressed to me around the complex, signed Dragon Lord. Yes, that exact name. I didn't change that bit. He'd put them in the open, like on hangings, the community laundry room, and even mirrors and doors throughout all the 7 floors, in the hopes that I'd find them. My mother and aunt found them and kept them from me. My mother tried to get a restraining order against him for me. The police told her that since he didn't do anything, we can't take any action. Lovely justice system we have, huh? Eventually, I moved my stuff out of there to get away from that situation. The last day I was there, he walked up to me and spat in my face and called me a stupid whore. I was done with him. Never had to see him again. However, my tale does not end there. Just like so many other creepy old guys' stories, he persisted. Unbeknownst to me, Dragon Lord was mailing porn mags to my dad with messages signed Dragon Lord. My mom apparently was getting sex toys from him for me. I later found out that the notes were very sexual in nature and even called me a whore in most of them. I heard from my friend that he started stalking another little girl and even started to carry an axe around the complex. I don't know why he wasn't kicked out or arrested. He might have had a deal with the landlord or something, I don't know. It has been over 10 years since I last saw him. I'm studying actual karate now with my family and loving it. I don't know if Dragon Lord is still alive, however, it doesn't matter. If you're still out there, Dragon Lord, let's just never meet in this life and the next lifetime. 2. This story has been years in the making, and it pains me to have to tell this story. In a million years, I would never have imagined my life would have made this turn. With all the coronavirus stuff going around the world today, things have been incredibly stressful, especially in a place I called my home. My youngest child, from school and family needing a place of stability to stay or even live, groceries being needed, toilet paper nowhere in sight, and the mass hysteria provided by social media has just made the crazy conspiracy theories even more crazy. You see, I grew up in a home with an open-door policy, especially to family members. I woke up knowing I would be heading to the airport to pick Agatha up that morning, my daughter-in-law. She was flying back to our home in Arizona to be closer to her son, or so I was told. I began my morning the way I always did, making a pot of coffee and hoping no one was awake yet. You see, the morning was my me time. The house was quiet, no one running around screaming, yelling or giving attitude, or starting fights with me. And I thought, this is going to be a good day. Agatha will be back. Gil and Agatha can put their marriage back together, be good parents to their child, and I could take a step back from parenting and watching over my grandson. While I love my grandson, I need a break from being another parent for this child, as his mom was pretty much MIA since he was about a year old, and he had just turned 3. Then maybe, just maybe, my marriage would stop being such a shit show. and my husband would finally treat me with some respect. I got dressed and went to the airport. This was very uneventful. She came up the long walkway, we got her baggage from the carousel, and left as we went back to my car in the parking garage. She was having a normal conversation with me. I was explaining how things needed to be calm at home, and both her and Gil needed to be more responsible and take care of Cornelius together. She agreed, and we stopped at the grocery store to see if we could find some toilet paper that I was not able to find in my town. We did not. However, we found some good substitutes. When we got home, Cornelia was excited to see his mom. Gil seemed happy to see her too. Ag was standoffish, as the relationship between the two of them was hard. Him, being a teenager, was acting out and always talking back and getting into trouble, and Agatha, being very vocal, expressed her disapproval of his behavior. Ag was very resentful, actually with several different people in our home. I began my normal Sunday activities of cleaning the kitchen and watching TV, yelling at the dog to shut up because he was barking at the corner of our backyard, excitedly telling my husband what we scored at the grocery store and that we could use as toilet paper, and internally feeling mentally exhausted, externally overwhelmed at the best of times. After I finished cleaning the kitchen, Gil and Agatha came to me to ask if it was okay if I watched Cornelius while they took a walk and talked about things. I thought this was a great idea, so I said, yeah, that's a good idea. Cornelius and I sat down to watch his favorite movie, Frozen. I had my phone in hand, watching YouTube videos. Gil and Agatha had come back not long after they had left, saying it was too hot outside. They went to their bedroom and things were quiet. I didn't give it a second thought. About 20 minutes later, Cornelius gets down and declares he's going to see his mom and dad. I sat on the couch, embarrassingly engrossed by this movie I had seen no less than 20 times this month. And shortly after Cornelius walked away, Gil comes in with Cornelius in hand and says, "Mom, I think we need to call 911. I looked at him like, what the hell, and say, why do you think that? He says the thing no person ever wants to hear about a loved one. Agatha isn't breathing. Everything went in slow motion. I got up as quickly as my shaky body would let me, as I had no idea what awaited me behind that bedroom door. I opened the door and saw Agatha sprawled out on the bed, looking like she was asleep, but different. She had a blue tint all over her face. Her lips and eyelids were this sickly shade of blue. My first thought is this has to be makeup, and they're just messing with me. I walk closer to her to see she's not breathing, and adrenaline kicks in. I get up next to her, saying her name over and over again, with no response. I turn to Gil and yell to him, "Call 911 and take Cornelius up to Egg and tell him to keep him in the room until we come and get him. Do it now." He does. I'm slapping her face, shaking her, and hearing a strange gurgling sound coming from her, but still no true breaths. I smack her really hard and no response. Gil comes back into the room with the 911 operator on speaker, and she's telling me we have to perform CPR, and she must be on a hard surface. I drag her with a loud thud to the floor. It was just 2 mattresses on the floor, not a bed frame. I began the chest compressions and breaths and repeat until the EMTs knocked on the front door and were brought into the room. They asked a lot of questions to Gil, and as I knew she was in good hands, I went upstairs to check on Ag and Cornelius. I gave a brief explanation to Ag, as he could see the ambulance outside his window, and then went to my bedroom to find my husband in the shower, blissfully unaware of the crisis going on just 1 floor below him. I yelled at him out of frustration to get out of the shower and told him what had happened. I left the room and slammed the door. I went back down to the chaos to check on the outcome, worried of what that outcome would be. The EMTs gave Agatha something to counteract the effects of fentanyl. I didn't even know what that was at the time. I heard them saying things like, "You're lucky to be alive, you died, what did you take?" Another EMT was asking Gil what she had taken. He was stammering all over himself and not really saying anything helpful. I heard some mumbling coming from her, and before I could stop myself, I screamed, "Stop lying and tell them the fucking truth." I'm sitting on the bottom step, while 5 or 6 EMTs are working on getting her vitals back to normal. My son is pacing back and forth right outside the front door. My husband finally makes it down the stairs as they have her strapped to the gurney and wheel her out of the house. I ask, what hospital are you taking her to? And can her husband go with her? They told me which one and said no. No one can go with her or be with her in the hospital due to COVID. I put my head in my hands and just wait for the door to shut behind my son. I stood up on wobbly legs and grabbed him and hugged him so tightly, and I couldn't stop the tears from falling. I sobbed into his ear, "Don't do this to me ever again." He nodded. I walked into the kitchen where my husband began asking questions. I yelled at him. "While you were in the shower, I was performing CPR on her to keep her alive. She was blue, she was not breathing, she was dead." He reached out to me and hugged me and just let me cry. After several minutes, I had to pull myself together and take care of my family and do whatever needed to be done to put this event behind me. This is when I found out Agatha had been kicked out of her dad's house, where she was staying and why she flew back to Arizona. Because she had become addicted to Percocet and had done countless other drugs. She was released from the hospital after a few short hours after her life so closely came to an end. I was shocked. The following days were followed by her screaming throughout the day, saying she was in pain, drinking and doing anything else she could at night, calling ambulances almost daily to come get her because she thought she was dying, and in general turning my home upside down. Working from home became near impossible with the noise she was creating and the chaos she brought. Her husband and a friend of hers and I talked her into checking herself into rehab, where she lied about her illnesses and tried to manipulate the intake people into giving her drugs. They took her and gave her something. We could never get a full account of what she was on, and then she went into a comatose state. For 2 months she was unresponsive, and we had no way of checking on her other than phone calls. Life became work, taking care of Cornelius, watching Gil drink himself into a stupor, my husband being manipulative and mean towards me and Ag, and then doting on Cornelius. Calling the long-term care facility that Agatha was at to see if there were any updates. Daily, if not multiple times a day, rinse and repeat for the entire time. A couple of times we were able to do FaceTime videos with her, which were hard to say the least as she just stared blankly, even when Cornelius would get on and talk or sing songs to her. And one day she came out of it. However, she was never the same as before. She went through weeks of rehab and therapy, only to begin the drugs before even leaving the parking lot to come home. This is when I told her she could not come back to my home. I had her son, my youngest, and my stepson in my home. I couldn't have that in my home. And my husband told me I was a horrible person. I can't turn my back on her now. I was hurt and crushed that after all the time and energy I had put into being there for her, and her son and my son, and having a home to come back to, it wasn't enough for her to stop the drugs. I quickly realized that no matter what I did, my husband would never have any respect or love for me. I quit my job, called my parents to come and get me, Ag and anyone who wanted to leave with me, which ended up being Gil and Cornelius also, and I sold or gave away 80% of my belongings and drove away. I got divorced, and finally am living a life I can be proud of. Cornelius hasn't seen his mom in 2 years, and my husband became involved with Agatha. What I know of the life they have is a crazy-ass story that can be shared another time. Gil is learning how to truly live a good life for the sake of his son. He has severe trauma from his relationship with Agatha. He has sworn off ever getting involved with another woman again, but is becoming a good dad and supporting his son in every way he can. Ag is still struggling, but loving that Agatha and my ex-husband are no longer in our lives. He's a truly wonderful boy who is making me so proud. I love my kids, and they are the reason why I have kept moving on with my life. They are the reason I wake up each morning, and the reason I go to work each day. They are my people, and I will do anything to protect them. 3. This happened quite a few years ago. But before I begin, I would like to give a little background. I am the youngest of 5 children, ages 22, 21, 18, 16, and me, 8. At the time, yes, I was an unexpected surprise. At the time this event happened, my older sister was in college. She wanted the independent experience, so she lived on campus even though college was only a 45-minute drive away. I was very close to her. She was almost like a second mom to me. My sister Jody came home to stay for the Thanksgiving break. We all had a wonderful time. Plenty of games, food, and laughs. Sunday came all too soon, and it was time for Jody to return to her dorm. Monday evening, I was lying in bed, trying to sleep when I heard a noise. It wasn't too late, but late enough and dark enough to not have visitors. I heard my parents talking to someone, and then they all moved to the kitchen. This was too much for my curiosity, so I snuck downstairs and out to the dining room. The kitchen had a swinging door, so I was able to eavesdrop with no problem. I wish I hadn't. My sister explained that while most students go home for the holidays, there are some students that stay on campus. It could be because they lived too far away, didn't have any close family, or were behind on schoolwork, among other reasons. Anyhow, two of her classmates had decided to stay on campus, Brooke and Peggy. The building they lived in had 4 floors, a basement, and 3 floors where the dorms and students were housed. The basement was for laundry, exercise equipment, and a group activity room. Brooke lived on the 1st floor and Peggy lived on the 3rd floor. The Saturday after Thanksgiving, Peggy was down in Brooke's room. They had ordered a pizza and were just talking and playing card games. At around 11 p.m., Peggy was tired, so she decided to call it a night. Brooke wasn't tired yet, so she said she was going to catch up and do her laundry. The girls said goodbye and parted company. Peggy got back to her room and decided to take a shower before going to bed. An hour or so later, Peggy was awoken by a scratching sound. At first, the noise frightened her, and she lay there silently holding her breath. The scratching was steady and fairly consistent. As she lay there, she convinced herself that she was being silly. She was on the 3rd floor of an almost completely empty building. She reasoned the scratching could be mice in the wall or a tree branch scraping against the side of the building. And she rolled over and fell asleep. Sunday, Peggy got up, and when she went to leave her dorm room, found Brooke bloody and dead outside her door. Apparently, while Brooke was in the basement doing her laundry, someone snuck up behind her and bashed her head in with an iron pipe. The assailant, thinking Brooke was dead, dropped the pipe and ran. However, Brooke was not dead. She managed to crawl, leaving a trail of blood up to Peggy's room. Brooke had been scratching at Peggy's door looking for help, but no help came. The school closed for a week during the investigation. My sister Jody heard all of this upon her return to campus on Monday. She spent the day packing up her possessions and returned home that evening. Needless to say, she commuted the rest of her time until graduation. My parents nor sister ever knew I had been listening, but being a very anxious and sensitive girl, this story bothered me deeply. Still does. Worst thing, the murderer was never caught. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to True Scary Stories, episode 555. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use, or rather who sent in stories for use in this video. These are all subscriber submissions. If you'd like to support the channel financially, you can do so by joining my Patreon, and you'll get the videos a bit early, which is something I like to do for you guys. I could have been doing it all along, and I apologize for not doing so, but we're going to be doing that as standard going forward. You can also buy merchandise, and you can make donations during streams and videos if you wish. None of this is required, but it's always welcome, and the links are in the description. Okay, with that, let's move on to Hellfreezer's question of the day, and today's question is: given a choice right now, would you like cooler summers or hotter winters? So it's still going to be winter time. It's going to be dull and depressing and rainy, but it'll be warmer, which I think would make it clammier, so I don't personally think that'd be a great idea. Or would you like sunshiny days, without as much of the heat and more of a breeze. I mean, it seems like kind of a no-brainer, doesn't it? Personally, I'd like the slightly cooler summers, but with still to enjoy the sunshiny weather. But I could just be weird. I mean, I am weird, but in that regard. So why don't you let me know what you think in a comment below? And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.